Wow. Thanks, Bob. It was worth staying up for. We don't get that kind of intro in London, and yeah, it's really nice to be here. My name's Johnny. I'm an alcoholic, and yeah, the truth of it is in London now, I don't think there's a single meeting in London where you get to speak for an hour. And I was just thinking before the meeting started, it's kind of a testament to AA and what I've found in these rooms that I'm not worried, as I'm sitting here now. I don't know what's going to come out of my mouth. I don't know what I'm going to speak about other than my story. It's not prepared. It's not... that's a long way from when I first came in these rooms, I was a nervous wreck. And I don't feel like that tonight, And we were joking, I've been going to the Miami group, and those guys, whoever does the speaking, whoever greets at the meeting always wears a suit and a tie, and I just thought it was amazing when I saw that. And then earlier on this evening, I was putting like a jumper away in the wardrobe, and I knew I was coming over to this meeting tonight, and I thought, let me get my suit and tie out, I love having the choice of that now, I never had those choices when I first came into AA. I was unmanageable, and I'll tell you all about that now, but my life was really unmanageable, and drink robbed me of all my choices in the end. Yeah, my sobriety date's the 3rd of March 2007, so by the grace of whatever it is I've found in these rooms, you can call it what you want, I call it God, but whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to believe it is, I found it in AA. That's where I found it, and I never had it before I came here, and I've got it now, and it's changed my life. And so by the grace of that thing, it's over 13 years. It's 13 years and 6 months, I think, since I've had a drink or any mind-altering substance. My story is one of relapse. I came into AA originally in 2000, and between 2000 and 2007, I couldn't get it. I never got beyond 21 days. In that 7 years, I believe I hit rock bottom in 2000, and then I got dragged along rock bottom. I got dragged along it, and, I got beaten up pretty bad, in that 7 years, I think I wanted it. I knew I had a problem. I just couldn't let go. I couldn't let go, and yeah, I was a boxer as a kid, and so I had this kind of, I knew I had willpower. I thought maybe that's what this thing was, this was like a lack of willpower, and that was baffling to me, because I knew I had willpower. I won the national championship as a kid. I think you guys call it like the Golden Gloves, I won that title when I was 16, and I knew I had willpower, but when it comes to alcohol, the truth of it is I just couldn't stop drinking. And that's the reason I'm here tonight, is like I couldn't stop drinking. So I don't know if there's any newcomers on the meeting. I'm going to tell you my story, from the beginning. But, if you're relapsing, if that's your story, keep coming back, I never got this thing. So, but I'll go from the beginning. My story is I started drinking at 16, and like I say, I was the national champion at the time. I was fit as a fiddle. I had a brain in my head, I had tremendous willpower. I wasn't silly, I wasn't a wally. I had a brain in my head. I could kind of achieve things. I could, I'd left school really young, but that felt like it was my decision to do that, like I hated school, hated it. And I couldn't wait to get out of there. So at the age of 13, I just totally focused on my boxing, and I left school, and I'd be in that gym. And I'm only saying this because I think it's relevant later on. It's very similar to my drinking, I'd go into that gym, and it would just be me, And there were other guys in there, but it was me in my little world, and I could shut the rest of the world out. The scary estate that I grew up on, the scary school life, it was scary for me. I know other kids who went there who didn't feel that fear, but I did. And I'd go into that boxing club, and that was my secret little world, And then at 16, I went out one night, and there was no big occasion, there was no special thing, but I had my first drink, and something happened. For the first time, I believe it's happened to me twice now, but for the first time, a power greater than myself came into my life. I didn't know it at the time. It was just this liquid that I didn't really like the taste of too much, is the truth of it. But something happened that doesn't happen to everyone. And for me, you know, we often talk about a spiritual awakening in these rooms. You know, sometimes it's of the educational variety. It happens gradually to people, and sometimes, like Bill Wilson, you know, they have a moment, a real moment. I had a real moment with drink. Boom. From night one, something happened when that stuff went in my body. I felt a part of, I just felt like I understood something, you know? This kind of missing link up until then. I'd always felt like I was born on the wrong planet, or you know, went to the wrong school, was born into the wrong family, you know? I was just never quite, I could never fit in anywhere. Even the boxing thing, you know, when I won the title, I remember them all celebrating and saying, wow, it's a great achievement. And I remember sitting in this pub and all the party was going on around me, just thinking, I'm moving on. This isn't it. This isn't it, you know? This isn't it. And so, yeah, something lit up in me that night. And I didn't know that at the time. I just, you know, was living life. I was 16, I had life ahead of me. And if you'd have told me then, like you guys told me when I first came to AA, that a power greater than myself was about to enter my life and change it drastically, I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it when I came to AA, smashed to pieces in 2000, and I didn't believe it when I had my first drink. I just thought it was fun, and it was fun. It's a lovely old saying I used to hear. It was fun, then it was fun with consequences, then it was just consequences. But in the beginning, it was fun, you know. And my story is I met my first kind of girlfriend, my first girl that I'd ever fallen for, you know, and she was a French girl, and I ran away to France. I left all of London behind, you know, all the stuff that I thought was holding me back, and I went to France, and it was great, you know. That's where my drinking kicked in. I got a job as a dishwasher in a restaurant in Paris, and I started reading the great romantic literature, you know, all these sort of tragic souls, you know, and or, you know, Orwell and all those guys. I was reading about all these kind of boozers, really, living in Paris and drinking, you know, like, and yeah, getting away with it, you know. When I look back now, it wasn't until I did a thorough sort of step 4 years later that I realised, you know, I lost my first job to drink in France. I lost my first relationship to drink in France. But it's cunning, you know, alcoholism. I never thought any of that at the time. It felt like they were all my decisions, you know. She's trapping me. She doesn't understand me. She doesn't, you know, I just need space. I just need, you know, I can't be trapped, you know. And but the truth of it was, she got in the way of my drinking. Bless her, you know. I lost my first job, you know. Or I'd walk away from jobs, you know, before I got pushed. I'd say, you know, I'd you know, become angry with the management and, you know, the system. And so that was kind of the beginning, really. When I look back now, I realise that was the beginning of this very slow descent into my world becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's what alcohol did to me, you know. The bar got lower and lower and lower. And what was once unacceptable started to become acceptable. And yeah, you know, it was really painful. And I came back to London, and you know, I found another mask, I guess. You know, I wanted to become like an actor. That was my thing. I'm going to be an actor, and so I joined up like a little college local to me and started doing these acting classes, and was working in these little theatres in London. You know, and again, I'd found another sort of mask, really, that enabled me to drink how I was drinking. You know, I'd be working on the building sites, and you know, all of those guys were heavy drinkers as well, it seemed to me at the time. Just anyone I hung out with was a drinker. I realise now in hindsight it's because that's the people I sought out, you know. But I felt like I was getting away with it, you know. And I started sleeping on people's couches, and I never paid rent to anyone, you know. And what I realise now was that bar getting lower and lower and lower. What was happening was I was becoming more and more and more self-obsessed, self-centered. Maybe I always was. I don't know. I don't really care now. You know, I just know that by the end of my drinking and somewhere along the way, I became so self-centered. All I really, truly cared about was me. You know, and that was it. You know, so the idea of paying people rent, you know, I'd be living on their couch, I'd be eating their food, but I really never gave too many thoughts about them at all. It was all about me. And yeah, you know, my world got lower and lower, and you know, I became homeless in the end. But again, the subtle nature of this kind of illness, it felt like it was my decision to do that. You know, I'd be having so many arguments wherever I'd be staying, like at my mum's on her couch, and you know, I'd come home drunk and she'd be shouting and I'd be screaming at her. And so I'd think, right, I'm not going home until they're all to bed. I'll go home after midnight. And then, you know, I'd come crashing through the door, or, you know, you think you're being quiet, and, you know, my mum would get up and say, what do you think you're doing? And I'd shout at her and scream at her because no one understands, you know. And so then I'd think, right, I won't go home till 3 a.m. And then that eventually became, right, I won't go home. I'll show them. I'll show them, you know. And I'd be sitting on a bench on the embankment, you know, by the River Thames. And it just became acceptable. I think I'm not going home tonight. And then tonight became 2 nights, became 3 nights. Before I knew it, I was homeless. And I didn't even see it happen. It all felt like I was making these choices to opt out of the system, you know. And I realise now that it was booze. It was drink. It was making all my choices for me. And they say the devil's greatest trick is convincing you he doesn't exist. And that's what booze did to me, you know. Like it was robbing me of everything. But I didn't see it happen. And I didn't know it was drink, you know. I thought drink was the only comfort I had from all of this other trouble, from all of this unmanageability. And what I couldn't see was that it was the drink that was doing it. And so, you know, it was a subtle foe. It tore me to pieces. And, you know, the final kind of part of that descent in many ways was I had a suicide attempt in 2004. So, as I said earlier, I'd already been coming to AA for 4 years. So if there's any newcomers on here, you know, who feel like they're not getting it, that was my story, you know. I came to an AA meeting in 2000. I've got no recollection of it. Someone gave me a big book, and they must have suggested you write your sobriety date in the big book. I don't remember, you know. I'm not a reliable witness to that stuff. I was drunk. I'd sit in meetings drunk. I was asked to leave an AA meeting because I was mumbling and repeating people as they shared, you know. And, this lovely woman who I know now, she's a friend now, Sue, but she was an old timer, and I remember her sharing, and she said, sorry, this is not fair, you know, this is not fair on the group. And I looked kind of scary. I didn't feel scary inside. I didn't know what I was doing, but I kind of looked quite scary, I guess. And this lovely guy called Phil took me outside and said, come on, what's happening, you know? And I lent £5 off him and disappeared into the night, you know. And they told me to keep coming back, you know, despite my behaviour. They said, keep coming back. Keep coming back. You got to behave yourself if you want to come in this meeting. But keep coming back. And I did. I kept drinking though. I never got beyond 21 days when I tried to do this thing on my own, you know. And that was how I was raised. You know, I'll beat this thing. I'll beat this thing. I thought it was something that I had to fight, you know. And I used to share that at meetings, you know. That's the one thing I will say, was I used to share really honestly, you know. And I would say that to any newcomers here, you know. Tell us how it is for you, you know, or anyone. Not even newcomers, people who've been around a while. Anyone, you know, let us know if you're struggling. And I used to do that. I was in a meeting and I used to say, you know, I know I've got willpower. I know I've got willpower. I was the ex-national champion. I know I've got willpower, you know. And this lovely old timer come up to me, Robert Nelson. He said, Sonny, he said, it's your willpower that's killing you. It won't let you let go. It won't let you let go. I thought this thing was something I had to fight. And I'd hear you guys say, you know, sometimes you've got to give in to win. And all of these strange paradoxes, you know. And that's what happened, really. AA got to me in the end. It got to me, you know. In 2004, I can't tell you why, I can't, you know, but I attempted suicide. I took an overdose, and it was the actions of a taxi driver that saved my life. I got sectioned as a result of that, and into the psych ward. And I came out of the psych ward. They put me in a homeless hostel and above a pub, and I went straight back on the drink. So I just hope that little story, it's a short version of it, but that kind of tells you, I just couldn't stop drinking. I couldn't stop drinking. I don't think I could fully concede that it was even the drink that was my problem. And yet it was clear to everyone around, that it was. Something happened in 2007 that had never happened before up until that point. I was convinced I was going to do this myself. I used to look at the steps on the wall, and there were some big problems with those steps as far as I could see it. The first problem was the first word of the first step, we. I wanted nothing to do with we whatsoever. And I really didn't, and you all seemed like nice people. There were a couple of you who I really liked, I would keep coming back to meetings because there were some people who I just enjoyed hearing share. And there was kind of an honesty going on in these rooms that I'd not really seen anywhere else, There was like a form of it in the pubs, It felt really honest in the pubs. Once we'd all had a drink, it felt like we were all speaking the truth then, But I'd wake up in the morning and know it wasn't really that. It wasn't really true. I wasn't really brave. I wasn't really attractive. I wasn't really funny. It was just this kind of strange thing that would happen when I drank. But I'd wake up the next morning and I'd feel empty again. It was like fake. And I realise now it was a fake spiritual awakening. Everything I've ever done for a loving God in these rooms, I did for alcohol. I did the 12 steps for alcohol. I can go right through the 12 steps. I've got my understanding of that now, Something in me knew that I was unmanageable and I couldn't manage life. And I handed my will and my life over to the care of alcohol as I understood it. Alcohol was my God. It was the first God in my life. It was a false God, I realise now. It wasn't the real thing. But you won't know that until you have a real spiritual awakening, That's the truth of it. But having had a spiritual awakening, I look back now and I realise what happened to me that first night I drank alcohol. It was the closest thing I'd ever had to a spiritual awakening. It really seemed to take away my problems. It took away my cares. It made me feel brave. It made me feel free. All the promises that I get now from recovery. Alcohol was the closest I'd ever felt to that happening in my life. But it was a false God. Someone once said alcohol gives you wings and then it takes away the sky. And it did that. It gave me wings. But it was false. I would wake up the next morning and the darkness would be even darker than before. And so something happened in 2007 that I'd never done before, ever. I couldn't even conceive of it. It felt impossible to do this thing. And what that was I got a sponsor. And I got beyond that. I got, that first word of the first step. I got a sponsor. It became we. And he was an American. He was one of you guys. And I didn't know his surname. I didn't know much about him really, but all I knew, it was a book study that we used to go to, and he had a way of sharing really honestly what was going on in his life on that day, and he somehow would always kind of bring it back to the step that was being spoken about, and he seemed to have like a design for life, like he seemed to be able to overcome his problems, and he was having a good life. He was living a good life, this guy. He was in London for a year. He used to share that he was in London for a year for business purposes, and there he was every week, week in, week out, doing the literature at an AA meeting and sharing about how he was dealing with life's problems and the successes of his life. There was something about him, he just seemed to have something that I didn't have, a way of dealing with things, and he hadn't had a drink in a good few years, and my ears would prick up. I'd just listen to him. I remember listening to him, and I knew he had something. And, for someone who used to act like a big shot in the pub, and when I was drinking, I was terrified of asking him, He tells the story, like he was doing the literature, and I went up and like everything I've ever done in Alcoholics Anonymous, I only just did it. I just got the words out. I went over to him and I said, how much is that big book, please? And yeah, okay, and how much is that just for today card? And how much, will you be my sponsor, please? You know, I just got the words out. And my heart was thumping. I felt like a 14-year-old, you know, asking a girl out for the first time. And God bless him, you know, he was in London. And I knew he was in London for a year. So the truth of it is this, I was such a manipulative, self-centered little alcoholic. You know, I thought, right, I used to sit in meetings and do what I thought was do the steps in my head, you know. If you're a newcomer, don't worry about it, man. Just keep coming back, you know, keep it simple. And a sponsor will take you through the steps. You don't have to worry about it, you know. But I used to sit in meetings trying to work it all out in my head, you know. And I'd be looking ahead to the God steps because I was an angry atheist, you know, and I thought, I ain't doing the God thing. That's not for me, you know. And I'd be looking at step 9s and thinking of people I had to, you know, I was well ahead of myself, you know, and I just used to drink again. I thought, I can't handle that. But then I asked this guy to sponsor me, and I knew he was going back to America in a year, you know. And I thought, right, I'll do my steps with him, and I'll tell him my secrets, because that's what I thought it was about, you know. And he'll go back to America, and I'll never call him again. You know, I'll delete his number. And I thought, that's how I'm going to get through this thing. And he's still my sponsor today, you know. And 13 years later, we've gone through everything together, you know. And it's the most authentic friendship and relationship I've ever had in my life. And I told him things I've never told anyone else, yeah. And so I asked him to be my sponsor, and he said, yeah, let's do it. And he turned up at my home. It's this home now, the flat I live in now. It was the same home, but it was a very different home then. It was a den back then, you know. Right? It was a place I used to bring strangers back here, you know, just desperate to keep the party going. It was horrible. I had no furniture, I had no anything, and he turned up at my front door, just this very kind man. That's all he was, you know. He was just a kind alcoholic, and he had a bag, and I opened my door, and he said, I bought us some eggs. You know, he's a New Yorker, you know, he had this big New York accent. He said, I bought us some eggs, Johnny. He said, let's start work. And I said, you better come in. And he came in, and there was no cooker. There was like a pipe sticking out the floor, you know, and I was waiting for him to run away, you know. I thought he was going to say, whoa, this guy's too much for me, you know. And I was rough then. I looked kind of rough, and I was rough around the edges, you know. I wasn't, yeah, you know, I wasn't in good shape. And I had a black eye when I first, you know. I wasn't in good shape. And he just looked around, and he said, that's okay, we don't need eggs, you know. And we sat on the floor in my kitchen, and we started to read the big book together. And something happened. Something happened, you know, and I'm not here to try and sell it to anyone tonight, or, you know, if there's any newcomers here, I'm not here to try and sell this to you. The best thing about AA is that no one is going to tell you what to do. And the worst thing about AA is that no one is going to tell you what to do. You know, this is your journey. And the fight that you're having is with yourself. It's with no one else, you know. The fight is the fight with yourself, and it was the hardest fight I ever had in my life. It nearly killed me. The fight with myself, and I didn't even know I was having it. I thought I was fighting the rest of the world, you know. And yeah, this guy took me through the steps, and you know, step 1, something happened just from reading that stuff from a book with another alcoholic. Something happened that had never happened before. When I got sectioned, it was into the hospital here called Guy's Hospital. It's like the big hospital in London, you know. It's like the kind of the national hospital, you know, and so it's cheap, you know. The psych, it's not like some rehab, you know. It was a dark place, like. But we had this really eminent psychologist who would come onto the ward and speak to us, and I'd speak to him about everything, you know, the class system. I'd speak to him about my mum, you know, who I thought was to blame for how I was, and my dad, who I'd never met, you know, the school that I went to, you know, the huge kind of estate, or, you know, I think you call it the projects, you know, that I grew up on. I'd speak to him about everything except my drinking. He would say, can we talk about your alcohol, you know, how much alcohol you drink? And I'd just, you know, I'd start lying. I'd just say, no, I drink a few on the weekend. He couldn't get into me. He couldn't get close to getting into my head. But this alcoholic, when I sat and read that book with him, and he'd just share a bit of his experience with me as we went along, you know, and he would listen to me, and for some reason I couldn't bullshit this guy. For some reason I kind of didn't want to, you know. I didn't want to. I wanted to tell him the truth, because he just seemed to understand it like no one else had understood it. And exactly as it says in the big book, you know, there were no lectures, there was no holier than thou sort of spirit to this guy, there was no money exchanging hands. I didn't even know his surname. I couldn't work out why he was turning up, you know. He just seemed to have a solution. There was no frothy emotional appeal. He wasn't begging. He said to me, he said, listen, I don't get a free set of tumblers if you get sober. You know, if you want this thing, come and get it, you know. And I tried to undo him, you know. I used to think he's not calling me, he's not, you know, but then I hear people say, it's your recovery. You got to go and get it. You call him, you know. And so this guy had something that I'd not had up until that point, you know. And he would make suggestions and, you know, get a little service commitment in a meeting. Now, I couldn't see what washing cups up or putting chairs out, you know, I couldn't see what that had to do with my drinking. You know, I realise now that what it had a lot to do with was my self-centeredness, my egotism, you know, that needed smashing, you know, and I didn't even know that I had it. I didn't even know that I had it. I had this attitude of, you know, like they'd say, we need someone to wash cups up at the end of the meeting. Do we have any volunteers? My default setting was to think someone else does that. Someone else does that, you know. I never knew that was self-centeredness. You know, I just thought I was either not good enough to wash the cups up or far too good, too busy. You know, I had nowhere to go. I'd rush out the meeting and then I'd get, you know, 500 yards up the road and realise I had nowhere to go to. You know, but the thought of sticking around at the end and washing a cup up was beyond me. And what AA's gently done through all of these kind of crazy suggestions you hear, like getting a service commitment and, you know, is it started to gently undo my self-centeredness. You know, I felt good. You know, I'd wash a cup up at the end of the meeting and I felt good. I couldn't deny it. It felt nice to be doing that, you know, and I'd walk home. I realised now what was happening was, you know, just like drinks slowly made that bar get lower and lower and lower. Things like doing a little bit of service in AA, sharing honestly in meetings, and it was starting to, that bar was starting to go up. And it was just as gradual as it came down. I didn't see it happening. You know, I didn't know why putting chairs out was keeping me sober, but it was. And, you know, we got to the God steps. You know, something happened around steps 1 and you know, I just saw it. For the first time ever, I saw that I was powerless over alcohol. And it was a revelation. It was a genuine revelation. Someone said to me in a meeting, the war is over, son, you've lost. They were the most beautiful words I'd ever heard. The war's over, you've lost. And it was okay, you know. Life hadn't stopped. I thought my life ended when I came into AA. I thought this was the last stop. And once I asked someone to sponsor me and I do the steps, that's it. My life's over. I become this kind of AA thing. And I realise now my life began when I gave in, you know. When I gave in and I asked for help, finally asked for help, and I stopped resisting the help in these rooms. My life began. You know, I have a big life now, thanks to AA, you know. And I saw it, you know. I saw that there was loads of things in life that I wasn't powerless over, you know, but the one thing I was, you know, I mean, I accepted I was powerless over gravity. You know, if you step out of a window, you're going to fall to the floor and break your bones. My head could compute that, you know, but I couldn't accept that I was powerless over alcohol. But something happened. I got it, you know. I got it in step 1, and I could see, you know, and it was the simplicity of it. I think I used to come back to meetings and I'd hear things from the old timers, you know. A guy called Robert used to share every week. He said, if you walk like a chicken and you cluck like a chicken, you're probably a chicken, you know. And it was things like that. I just started to see it. I was an alcoholic. The evidence was ridiculous. You know, it was insane. My life was falling apart around me and I couldn't stop drinking. And the consequences were getting worse and worse and I couldn't stop. So then we got to the God steps. I'd finally accepted that I was powerless over alcohol, but I wasn't going to do the God thing. And I told my sponsor that. I said, I'm not going to lie, you know. My whole thing was, I'm the real deal, man. You know, that's how I used to drink, you know, I'm the real deal. And I thought, I want to stay sober and I want what you guys have got, but I'm not going to lie to get it. Because that's all I could think that the God thing was. I'd never experienced it. And I'd hear things like harps playing and fluffy white clouds and a man with a big white beard. And, you know, I just think, I've never seen it. I'm sorry, I've never felt it. I've tried praying. I've tried all of that stuff and I've never felt it. And so I was like an angry atheist, you know. I used to come in and I wasn't even happy about not having a faith myself. I wanted to pick your faith apart, you know. I was very hateful. And so, yeah, you know, this guy, this other alcoholic, this sponsor of mine, I said to him, I'm not doing meditation. And he said to me, I'm afraid to inform you, you've already been doing it. And I said, how do you mean? And he said, well, you're going to AA meetings, aren't you? And I said, yeah. He said, what time do you go to an AA meeting? I said, well, you know, 7 o'clock in the evening. And he said, okay, you haven't had a drink now for a couple of months. So when you get to that meeting at 7 p.m., you've had all day dealing with people, places, and things. So by the time you get to that meeting, you must have a head like a box of fireworks, you know, like that. And I said, yeah, you know. He said, you have an hour of concentrated thought. And he showed me a dictionary, and one of the definitions in the dictionary of meditation was a period of concentrated thought. And he said, the honesty of other people in that meeting compels you to stop thinking about yourself for a minute, if you're lucky. He said, when you leave that meeting, do you feel more able to deal with the same people, places, and things that have been driving you mad all day? Do you feel a bit calmer? I said, yeah, I do. He said, that's group meditation. He said, that's meditation. Let's move on. And it was unbelievable, you know, like years, decades, 7 years of fighting this thing. And it was undone just like that, you know. It was that simple for me. It was a starting point. Meditation's grown for me now. I love meditation now. I explore it in all sorts of forms, you know. But that was enough for me to make a start. It was like AA meetings and meditation for me. When I get to a meeting, I settle, you know. I just settle for a minute. My head quietens down. I used to do like 3 meetings a day in my early days, you know, because it was the only place I could find serenity. I could find peace and quiet from my head, you know. It held me. These rooms held me. He said about prayer, you know. I said, I'm not doing prayer, you know. I'll do meditation, but I'm not doing prayer. And this is how my sobriety was. It was gradual. My awakening was of the, it was of the experiential sort of variety, you know. I had to awaken very slowly and gradually, and thankfully these rooms allowed me to do that, you know. And prayer, the original derivation of the word prayer means presence. And so to pray, you know, the verb is simply to become present. To become present. Again, this was news to me, you know. I was like, wow. He said, you can do that anywhere. You can do it after an argument. You can do it before a job interview. You can pray anywhere you want, you know. Say anything. Just say, help me. Say thank you. Say the serenity prayer, you know. But try it. Try it. It won't hurt you to try it. And it was true, you know. Like, I'd do it. I'd be nervous and I'd start trying prayer. And it's grown again now. It's grown into something now that I love and enjoy and explore and pass on to others. But it was beautiful for me to learn it gradually like that. So that was my in, really, around step 3 and steps 2 and 3, which I thought I could never do. I thought these things were for other people, you know. You had to pretend. I didn't realise this was a real thing. It became practical and real for me. And then we got to step 4, you know, and again, I'd done it for drink, you know, like with alcohol, when alcohol was my God. You know, I handed my will and my life over to the care of that, as I understood it. I thought it was my best friend. And then I took a fearless and thorough inventory of everyone else. Started to realise why the world had done me so much wrong, you know, and so I just had to do the same thing for sobriety. for a loving God, you know, and I did a thorough inventory, and I wanted to do it. If I'm honest, the inventory part, I wanted that bit. I wanted to get my resentments out. I was full of them. I was full of hatred and darkness and secrets, and I didn't want to tell anyone my secrets. You know, all those seedy places I'd been in drink and all the seedy stuff I'd done, and just the squalid sort of shameful behaviour, you know, the all of it, the nonsense, the lying, the cheating, the fighting, the manipulating, all of that. I didn't want to tell anyone that, but I wanted to get my resentments out. I wanted to find out why the world had done me wrong. So I kind of went into the fourth step inventory. I loved the first column. You know, I was writing these names down. My mum did this, and my uncles did that, and my school did this, and, you know, everyone was on it. Then I got to the fourth column, you know, where I had to find my part in things, and something happened. Something happened. That fourth and fifth step, you know, I shared it with another alcoholic, and I'll say it again for any newcomers in this room, or someone who hasn't had the beautiful experience of experiencing it, you know. Something happened that had never happened before. And just like everything else I've ever done in AA, I only just did it. Even on the morning of my step 5, I thought, I'm not telling him that one. I can't see what that's got to do with me staying sober. You know, it's not even to do with my drinking. You know, it's a, you know, some person, place or thing that I'm ashamed of. You know, I'm not telling him that one. And thank God, you know, thank God on that day I got it out. I got it all out, everything. And I saw my part in all of it. You know, and I needed help. I'm utterly convinced I couldn't have done that on my own. And for me, I needed another alcoholic. You know, it talks in the big book, do it with your wife, do it with your... I don't know if I could have done that, you know, like, thank God, like, you know, in this generation of AA, we have sponsors and we have, you know, this guy just guided me kindly. You know, we sat on a park bench in Hyde Park, and I told him things I'd never told another human being. And I saw it all from a different perspective, you know. It was just like something went click, you know. And from that day on, I can honestly say, it's like an invisible line, so you never really know where it happens, but I can honestly say, post step 5, I've never felt hopeless. I've felt all sorts of things in recovery. I've had highs like you wouldn't believe, you know. I've grown a career in recovery. I got married in recovery, you know. I got divorced in recovery. You know, the past 13 years, I've had an amazing life. Highs and lows like you wouldn't believe. All of life. You know, I've grieved the loss of loved ones. I've had incredible experiences. And, you know, and I've never needed to drink through any of it. I've not even desired it. That's a miracle, you know. That's a miracle for me. I've not needed to drink, you know, and throughout all of those highs and lows, I've sobbed. When my marriage broke up, I sobbed. I had a broken heart. It was a mutual thing. We both knew we needed it and all of that, but it's still the grief I went through. You know, the guilt, the feelings of guilt, the feelings of shame, the feelings of resentment. I felt everything. You know, it was like the grief cycle. I went through it all, and but I never felt hopeless. I was in a fetal position one night on this floor, you know, sobbing in pain. I didn't know if that pain was ever going to leave me. But I didn't think about having a drink, and I didn't feel hopeless. I knew it was going to pass somehow. That's faith. I never had that before I came into AA. The closest thing I had to that when I came into AA was alcohol. I just used to have to drink on that stuff, you know, and it got worse and worse and worse. My experience with this is it's got better and better and better. That's the truth of it. If that wasn't the case, I wouldn't still be here. I keep coming back because I love this thing, you know. It keeps growing, and so, you know, the 4th and 5th steps, they blew my life apart, man. That something happened on that park bench that day that was wonderful, you know. And step 6 and 7, really, you know, they call them the forgotten steps in the book, you know, and I understand that now. We kind of did it on the day, and I did. In that moment, on that bench, I was willing. I really was willing for God to take it all away. I saw in that 5th step all of the manipulation, all of the things that I thought I needed to keep ahead in life, you know. I need to be one step ahead of everyone else. You know, I need to be fitter than everyone else, or I need to be stronger, or I need to outthink everyone else. That's how I'm going to stay safe in life. And I realised that behaviour had pushed everyone away from me. My pride, my self-centeredness, my low self-esteem. you know, my huge ego. I didn't even know these things were in me. You know, it's AA that's taught me all of this stuff, and it works for me. You know? And those behaviours that I thought were getting me ahead in life, they were pushing everyone away. In the end, no one could be around, even people who loved me dearly. They just couldn't get close to me in the end. And you know, it was a revelation to see it. It was a revelation. You know? There's a hymn, isn't there? I'm not a religious man now. I don't belong to any denomination. AA is my church. You know, this is where I come. This is where I've got friends from all denominations. I've got friends who are Christian. I've sponsored men, Christians. I've sponsored a Hindu, a guy who's you know, his faith is Hinduism. My sponsor's a Jewish man. You know, like I've sponsored. You know, this thing is what it is. I've been to my local Buddhist center in recovery. I explore all sorts of things, but my church is AA. You know, this is where I come. God speaks to me through you guys. That's how I see it. I see people get sober. You know, I sponsor men now, and I see broken souls. You know, even with my own experience, I still get some guys who ask me to sponsor them, and I think, I don't know if you've got a chance, you know? Thankfully, it's not up to me, it's God, you know, and I take them through the book the same way the guy took me through the book, and I see these people grow. I see their families come back. I see them build lives for themselves. It's beautiful to see, you know. How can you not believe in it? I see it practically all around me. And yeah, you know, and I'll speak briefly on step 9, you know. Again, just like everything, even with all of those experiences I've told you, even with all of that breaking down of my self-centeredness and all of that, I got to step 9, and just like everything else I've done in AA, I only just did it, you know. I thought I've done step 5 now, you know, and there was some of those step 9s, even with that experience under my belt, I thought, I can't do that one. And my mum was my miracle one, you know. She was the one where I thought, she owes me an apology, you know. She owes me an apology. And the level of resentment, both ways, from her to me and me to her, you can't undo that. Nothing will undo that, ever. Nothing. And it happened, you know. A miracle happened. I sat with my sponsor in a cafe, and he said, there's this one step 9 you've not done, you know. And I said, yeah. I said, you know, I can't do it, Jay. You know, if I open up to her like that, and, you know, like I've done with some of these other step 9s, and she'll abuse it. It was fear, you know, fear. I was still fearful, and it's had to be gently undone in these rooms, you know. And you know, I'd sit in meetings, and I'd see young mums, you know, talking about how difficult it was raising their kids, and I used to sit there in my self-centered way and think, what's that got to do with my drinking? It was all about me, you know. What I didn't realise was those mums talking about how tough it was raising a kid and how scary it was raising their child sober were teaching me about my mum. They were giving me empathy of how scary it must have been to raise a kid up on an estate like my mum did. I didn't know that was happening. I was sitting there like an ungrateful brat thinking, what's this got to do with my drinking? Stuff happens to you in these meetings and you don't even know it's happening. That's why we say to you, keep coming back. Keep coming back. If you want to sit in this meeting thoroughly ungrateful, bored at my chair or whatever, don't worry, just keep coming back, man. Something's happening to you and you don't even know it's happening. You're waking up and you're awakening and you don't even know it's happening to you. It's beautiful. It's grace. You're being carried. And I said to my sponsor, I'm willing, but not yet. Because he said to me, are you sure you're not even willing? And it says in our big book, willingness is the key. If you can find the key, willingness, the door will open itself. And that's been my experience time and time again in these rooms. All you have to do is become willing, just to take the next right step. That's all you need to look for. Whatever that next right step is. Maybe it's sharing honestly tonight in this meeting that you're having a tough day. You know, maybe it's getting a sponsor. Maybe it's calling your sponsor. You know, whatever the next thing is that you're not doing today, you know, maybe that's all you have to look for. Just the next right step. And this is my truth, you know. Within 1 week of me saying I'm willing but not yet, I bumped into my mum for the first time in 4 years. We hadn't seen each other in 4 years, and I bumped into her in a market, East Street Market in South London. Thousands of people, and I bumped into someone, and I was just about to say I'm sorry to them, and it was my mum, and my heart was thumping. boom, boom, boom. Again, Mr. Big Shot here, you know, in the pubs acting like some big, brave badass, you know. And there I was in front of my mum, terrified. Boom, boom, boom. And, you know, inside me was fear. My fear wanted to say, go away, leave me alone, you know. But whatever it was that I was learning in these rooms came out of my mouth instead of my fear. And she said, how are you? You know, it's good. And I was like, yeah, I'm good, thanks, you know. She said, you look really well, you look different, you know. And she said, your sister, my sister Lisa, you know, she said, Lisa tells me you're not drinking, and I'm really happy for you, you look really well. And what I wanted to say was, don't you come near my sobriety. Don't you come near my sobriety. That was what my fear was, you know. But what came out of my mouth was the words, yeah, thanks, Mum. Look, I might need to speak to you about that someday, you know. And to my horror, she said, we'll do it now if you want. And I was like, oh no, I gotta go. I gotta go. And again, my fear wanted to say, no, we'll do it another time, you know. But what came out of my mouth was, yeah, okay, let's do it. And we went and we sat in a little cafe and ordered a cup of tea. I called my sponsor outside on the phone. I said, you won't believe this. He just laughed. He said, I believe it. There's no such thing as coincidences in AA. He said, get used to those. They're going to happen a lot. And I sat there and I'd done something I'd never done before, you know. My mum and I were two people who, all we'd ever done at that point, were two scared people, you know, pointing the finger at each other. You're to blame for why my life is like it's like. You're to blame. You're to blame. And I did something because of what I'd learned in AA and because of all those women I'd hear sharing about, you know, because of what I'd learned about myself through the first 9 steps. For all of those things, something came out of my mouth that had never come out of it before, and I took care of my part in it. And I said to her, all I said was, you know, it can't have been easy for you. I'm starting to realise now that it couldn't have been easy for you to see me become what I was becoming. And I was waiting for her to go, yeah, you put me through hell, you know. And she didn't. She said something I'll never understand it to this day. She said, it wasn't you, it was me. And so these two people who'd spent a lifetime pointing the finger at each other, all of a sudden we're in this cafe saying, no, it wasn't you, it was me. It was me. And it was unbelievable. It was unbelievable, you know. And I had all sorts of other Step 9 experiences. Some of them didn't go like that, you know, so I don't want to make it, you know, this is a very real program, you know. You'll have all sorts of experiences. But that was a miracle. That was a miracle. She's a big part of my life now, you know. She's my mum. I can't even say that the relationship was restored to something because we never had that before. But we've got something beautiful now. It's incredible. I love calling her. I love telling her I love her. I love listening to her. You know, this self-centered, you know, I used to ring people up and it was just to, you know, go on about my troubles. You know, I'd call people up and it would invariably end in, can you lend me a $5? You know, I never cared how people were. You know, it was all about me. I love calling people now and asking how they are and listening and caring on a good day. Truly caring, you know, it's lovely. And so Step 9 was, again, I only just did it. I only just did it with the help of all of you lot. I needed all of you, man. All of the shares I'd heard over the years, people sharing about their Step 9s, and it was all with me on that day when I needed it. That's a power greater than myself, you know. And we're coming to the end now, you know. So the last 3 steps, you know, I kind of keep it simple. I believe those are the steps that the maintenance steps, you know, you hear them called that. I like that. I keep taking inventory, you know, things come up. I had a really big week last week. A really big week. There was some work stuff going on that needed some big decisions that are scary. I've got a career now, you know. They said if you keep coming back to AA, you'll have problems in areas you never had problems. You know? And I have to think things like that now. You know, I've got a mortgage. You know, and in these times of Corona, I've got to think about how I'm going to pay that. And, but I'm cool with it, man. I'm covered. I've got it, you know. I'm manageable now, you know. I've got a career. You know, my family are in my life. It's a beautiful life, you know. I will mention specifically Step 12. Because again, you know, with all of that experience, and even that thing with my mum and other people where I started to clear up the wreckage of the past, you know, and starting to live happily in the present, and that peace in the present. And, you know, even with all that experience, I got to step 12, and you'd think I'd want to run out and start sponsoring people. Not this self-centered alcoholic. If I could have had it my way, I would have just gone and, floated around and enjoyed my sobriety. I was terrified when the first person asked me to sponsor them. The same fear of putting my hand up in a meeting all those years before, saying, my name's Johnny, I'm an alcoholic. The same fear as when I stood in front of my mum that day in the market. The same fear as when I sat on the bench with my sponsor doing that at step 5, It was there in step 12, I thought I wasn't good enough to sponsor other people, My sponsor knew what he was talking about. I don't know. I've just got through this thing. I don't even know how I've done it. I just did it a day at a time. And thankfully, just like with everything else, I said yes. That's what AA's taught me to do, like washing those cups up. I just started to learn to say yes, and I started to do things that I didn't believe in before. And I started to sponsor other men, and I love it now. I love it. I think about all the men I've sponsored in the past 13 years, and an incredible group of men. You couldn't write them, they're so different. It's been incredible watching these people get sober, watching their families come back into their lives, watching this fellowship grow up around me. And that's grown now. Like Bob said, this thing came along, Corona. I didn't want to go on Zoom meetings. I'm not doing Zoom meetings. I don't even know how Zoom works, That's where I come from, a place of contempt prior to investigation, every time. And thankfully, AA breaks it down every time, because I just keep coming back. Zoom's been wonderful for me. This thing that I didn't even want to try, it's been beautiful. I go to the Miami group. I can't wait to meet those guys in real life. I've met friends all over the world in this thing. In real life, I've been lucky to travel with my work, and I've been a secretary of a meeting in Rome, in Italy. I became a secretary of a meeting there, and I was secretary of a meeting in Cape Town in South Africa. I travelled in sobriety, it's been beautiful all over the world. All over the world. I've been to meetings where I've not even understood a word of what's been said. I went to a meeting, it was all in Icelandic, and I loved it. I got what I needed that day, and I made friends. Still my friends now, we're all in touch. Can't wait to meet Bob and you guys when this is over. I get to travel a bit, hopefully, God willing. I love AA. I love it, and I love sponsoring other men. I love that I live a life of honesty. I love that I get to choose to wear a little suit tonight. Who'd have thought? I love it. I love it. To make myself a coffee, sit in clean clothes. I love that my family aren't worried about where I am tonight. I don't rob people of their peace of mind just for today. It's an incredible life, living sober. It's the simple things, If you're a newcomer, keep coming back, They used to say, the good news is there is a solution. The bad news is we're it. I used to love that. I used to look around at all these characters and think, surely not, man. They're madder than me. And turns out they had the answers I needed. So I think we're there. I think that's an hour. So I'm gonna listen to you guys now. I'm really looking forward to that. Bob, thanks for asking me, man. I really appreciate it. Some of the Miami guys are on it tonight. Thank you guys, for making me so welcome over these past few months. It's been a real ride. I've loved it. I'll leave it there. Thanks.